income sources. They don't have to tell you who pays them. You just have to trust them that they have no conflict of interest when they vote. Full income source disclosure. Full income source disclosure. Now, by the way, if you work for people it's so sensitive that you can't reveal, don't run for office. Okay? We deserve to know when you have a conflict of interest. We need to end lawmakers' ability to police themselves. House and Senate ethics committees, slapping the wrists of those who break ethics laws. I don't even think you can break an ethics law in South Carolina. I think you have to work at it, personally.
I don't know what ethics is, that's the problem.
I mean, well, that's the thing. Oh, did we accidentally make that illegal? Whoops.
Yeah.
Let's fix that. All right? They'll fix that faster than the ballot fiasco. That has to be stopped, and it is time to strengthen the open records laws. There is no excuse for legislators to exempt themselves from their communications, and anybody who tells you constituents send us very sensitive personal material and we don't want to report that publicly, here's what I have to say. If you are sending your politician super sensitive stuff that you need your politician to take care of for you, I'm going to tell you to rethink that decision. And B, I'm going to tell you that your right to a super secret favor does not supersede his right and her right to know whose interests our lawmakers serve. No right to an exemption. And by the way, Governor Haley, when she went on the road saying she wanted to get rid of that exemption, she kind of left out another part of this, like her state agencies. Right now, state agencies stonewall you if you want information. They charge you costs, get this, for labor to gather public information, which belongs to you. And by the way, you pay these people already. Okay? Ridiculous. There are school districts telling us it'll be $200,000 to answer a FOIA request because of the labor costs. Costs you already pay for. The governor has the power right now to enforce that change in her agencies. Alan Wilson has the ability to enforce FOIA laws so that any entity that receives a public dollar or spends a public dollar is subject to FOIA. That means your county associations, your municipal associations, your public-private partnerships, your economic development entities, the ports authority, Santee Cooper, across the board, the law is very clear. But no one enforces it. No one enforces it. That's something you can call right now. While you're asking your legislators, by the way, to disclose their income sources. Let's find out how serious they are about ethics reform in Columbia. And finally, I saved this one for last because it is the most bizarre. State law actually says the governor is supposed to write the budget. We discovered that quite by accident. But did you know that 2 legislators weren't supposed to shut the door and write the budget in secret? Well, they're not. The governor is supposed to write the state budget. Does that make sense? Now, come on, guys. Surely on this one, do we really think legislators ought to be writing the budget on statewide spending priorities? Or do we kind of think legislators are going to have their own priorities, which again, they get to appropriate the budget and they should. But should they be the one presenting spending priorities for state agencies? Should they be deciding what programs ought to be funded in state agencies? No. You elected one person to do that on everyone's behalf. So, the budget is supposed to be submitted by the governor, but here's the good part. House Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committees are required by law to hold open, joint hearings to consider the governor's budget and to debate it. How many times has that happened? Correct. Can you imagine how different your budget would be if the governor had to stand up in front of you and say, everything in here is my work. I did this. Do you think your budget would be different? If one person for whom you all voted had to take ownership of it? And what if you got to go to those hearings? What if you got to give them your input? And then what if they had to go back and put the budget on the floor after it had been publicly heard twice, right? 3 points of input for you. You really practically have none right now. So this is a huge and important way to take charge of spending and to not allow a handful of very skilled lawmakers to hide money in the budget, to work in little treats and little projects and fund all kinds of secret economic development boondoggles. Look, they're funding these economic development councils on whose board legislative leaders sit. Corruption? Is that a corrupt way to run a government? I think so. Is it legal? Of course it is. Everything they do is legal. So that is just a snapshot of where we need to start. The fundamental question is simply this. Do we believe we have a right to strive for the freest state in America? What else? Throw out some suggestions of another place you want to live. Do you want to continue to live in the most politically controlled state in the country? Because that's where you live now. National groups have come in here and smacked us down for having one of the most corruptible governments in the country, for having one of the most secretive incentive processes in the country. We flunk on a lot of areas. But this time I'm going to tell you it's true. And for those of us who have been standing up and fighting this stuff lately, there is blowback, and Talbert will talk about that some, because they don't like it. They do not like it. And they've been pretty vocal about not liking it. But you know what? I'm betting that you want to change things. I'm betting that you want to dig in, and I'm going to ask you to go home and think about it. Really give it some thought. Do you want to live in the freest state in America? Because I don't know how our nation becomes free again if our states are not free. I don't know how you control Washington, D.C. if you cannot control Columbia. I don't know how you fix this country if we cannot fix our own state. How do we set an example? I'll tell you one way we did. By we, I mean all of these activist leaders, Talbert and Harry Kibler and Karen Martin and Britt and Judy Adams and so many others. You know what they did? Some of you were probably part of this. In response to the theft of your elections, they took to the streets. And in 6 weeks, all across this state, they got more than 300,000 petition signatures. And they put most of those candidates, Democrat and Republican, back on the ballot. Now that is representative democracy at work. That's what that is. In response to the worst thing that can happen, the theft of your elections, the corruption of the process, the best of things happened. You saw people stand up and say enough. And I hope you'll keep on standing up and say enough. And I hope that you will not accept excuses. I hope that you will look to the Founders' vision. And I would ask you, jump on the Policy Council's websites, scpolicycouncil.org, thenerve.org. Emily has a sheet she's going to pass around. If you put your email on it, we will send you updates from thenerve.org, where investigative journalists and citizen reporters are putting investigative journalism back to work following the money. You're going to read some things on the Nerve you will not read in your local paper, I promise. So with that, I will take questions if anyone has any.
Just so y'all know, the sign-up sheets are on clipboards and they have been